Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been coming to this little slice of heaven in Ontario for over a decade now. Every August, without fail, I pack up my car and drive the 5 hours from Toronto to this peaceful riverside retreat. It's my annual escape from the hustle and bustle of city life, a chance to recharge and reconnect with nature. I'm a 50-year-old woman, divorced for the past 8 years, and I work as a high school principal. It's a demanding job, and by the time August rolls around, I'm always desperate for some peace and quiet. This rental has become my sanctuary over the years. The owner, a kind elderly gentleman named George, has become a good friend. He always makes sure I get the best cabin, the one with a private deck, hot tub, and that beautiful gazebo where I spend hours reading and bird watching. This year, I arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. After settling in and unpacking, I realized I needed to stock up on groceries. The nearest town is about a 20-minute drive, so I hopped in my car and made a quick run to the local supermarket. I returned about an hour later, my arms full of grocery bags. As I was fumbling with my keys at the cabin door, I heard footsteps on the deck. I turned to see a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, walking towards me. She was wearing nothing but a bathrobe, her hair damp, as if she'd just gotten out of a shower or hot tub. Without so much as a hello, she launched into her spiel. The young woman informed me that she and her partner would be doing a photo shoot in the gazebo the next morning. She said they would be moving my boats out for the photo shoot, but assured me they would put them back. She presented this information as if it were a courtesy, despite not asking for permission. I stood there, grocery bags still in hand, completely dumbfounded. Who was this woman? And why did she think she had any right to use my rental space? Before I could even respond, she continued her rapid-fire questioning. She asked if I was staying alone or if I had a husband and kids with me. She inquired whether I owned the cabin and how much it cost. She also wanted to know how long I had been there. I felt my blood pressure rising. This was my private space, my time to relax, and here was this stranger invading my privacy and making demands. I told her firmly that she was in my private space and asked her to leave. The young woman tried to defend herself, claiming she was just being friendly. I responded by telling her that she was intruding on my space and invading my privacy. I pointed out that her questions were intrusive and creepy. I made it clear that she would not be doing a photo shoot in my gazebo, either tomorrow or any other time. I again asked her to leave immediately. Her friendly demeanor vanished in an instant, replaced by a condescending sneer. She told me there was no need to get snippy and insisted that they would be doing the shoot the next day, warning me not to interfere. She then suggested, given my attitude, that I should head into town by 8 and not come back before 2. This entitled brat was trying to dictate when I could be in my own rental. I firmly repeated that it wasn't happening and told her to get off my deck and out of my space immediately. The young woman accused me of being unreasonable, arguing that since I was the only one with a gazebo, I needed to share. I flatly refused and once again told her to leave immediately. I'd had enough. I went into the cabin, locked the door behind me, and immediately messaged George, the owner. I explained the situation and asked him to intervene. The next morning I woke up early, half expecting to see the woman and her partner sitting up for their photo shoot. But the gazebo was empty and all was quiet. I breathed a sigh of relief and settled in for a peaceful morning of reading and coffee on the deck. Around 11 a.m., I noticed some commotion coming from the smaller cabin next door. I could hear George's voice, sounding uncharacteristically stern. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wandered over to the edge of my deck to see what was going on. George was standing outside the smaller cabin, arms crossed, while the young woman from yesterday and a man I assumed was her partner were hastily throwing bags into their car. George was reminding them that checkout was at 10 a.m., pointing out that it was now 11, and they were still there. He mentioned that he already had new guests waiting to check in. The young woman protested, arguing that they had paid good money for the place and should be allowed to leave when they wanted. George firmly reminded her that she had agreed to the terms when she booked and asked them to finish packing up and leave the premises immediately. As they continued to argue, the woman spotted me watching from my deck. Her eyes narrowed and she stomped over, pointing an accusing finger at me. She blamed me for their situation, suggesting that if I had just let them use my gazebo, they wouldn't be in this mess. I calmly replied that her poor planning was not my responsibility and suggested that next time she should book a place that has the amenities she needs for her photo shoot. George had had enough. He ordered them to get in their car immediately, threatening to call the police for trespassing if they weren't gone in 5 minutes. The entitled woman's face turned an impressive shade of red, but her partner had the good sense to grab her arm and pull her towards their car. As they drove away, I could see her gesticulating wildly in the passenger seat. George walked over to my deck, shaking his head. He apologized for the incident and assured me that they wouldn't be welcome back. He expressed hope that they hadn't ruined my stay. I reassured Georgia that they hadn't spoiled my vacation at all and thanked him for handling the situation so well. I then invited him for a cup of coffee, mentioning that I had a fresh pot brewing in the gazebo. We shared a laugh, and as we sat in the gazebo, enjoying our coffee and the peaceful river view, I felt all the tension from yesterday melt away. This is why I come back year after year. Not even entitled strangers can ruin the magic of this place. 2 years ago, I left everything behind to travel the world. It was a dream I'd had since I was a kid, watching those travel shows on TV and imagining myself in exotic places. I saved every penny from my job as a software developer, lived frugally, and finally had enough to take the plunge. Before I left, I made sure everything was in order. I rented out my house to a nice young couple, had a friend check on things occasionally, and set off with just a backpack and a heart full of excitement. Those 2 years were amazing. I hiked the Andes, meditated in Tibet, danced at festivals in India, and swam with sharks in Australia. But eventually the call of home got too strong to ignore. I missed my own bed, my favorite coffee shop, and the familiar streets of my hometown. When I pulled up to my house, something felt off right away. The lawn was overgrown, trash littered the yard, and the paint was peeling. I figured the renters had bailed and my friend had dropped the ball on checking up. Annoyed but not too worried, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It was a mix of stale cigarettes, body odor, and something chemical I couldn't quite place. Then I heard voices coming from the kitchen. My heart started racing. Burglars? Squatters? I crept down the hallway trying to stay quiet. As I got closer, I recognized one of the voices. It was my aunt, the black sheep of the family. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she tried to scam my grandma out of her savings. I overheard my aunt boasting about deceiving someone, claiming that something was legal when it clearly wasn't. Her words were met with laughter, followed by a male voice I didn't recognize praising her cunning and expressing excitement about getting rich. I'd heard enough. I stormed into the kitchen, ready to unleash hell. There was my aunt sitting at my kitchen table, smoking my cigarettes. I'd quit years ago but kept an emergency pack, surrounded by 3 20-something guys who looked like they hadn't showered in weeks. I angrily demanded to know what was happening. My aunt reacted with surprise, then mockery, calling me the prodigal nephew. I cut through her sarcasm, asking about her presence and the whereabouts of my renters. She casually explained that the renters had left months ago, citing neighborhood decline. Her tone was flippant and unapologetic. I questioned her about moving in without permission or paying rent. She dismissed my concerns, citing family ties and claiming they had been taking care of the place. Looking around at the mess, I sarcastically commented on their idea of care. I then asked if they were cooking meth, noticing the suspicious chemical smell. One of her sons stood up threateningly, warning me to watch my words. I expressed disbelief, asking if they were actually running a meth lab in my house. My aunt nonchalantly confirmed their drug manufacturing activities, listing various substances and justifying it as market flexibility. Realizing my own aunt had turned my home into a drug den, I ordered them all to leave before I called the police. My aunt's demeanor changed. She firmly refused to leave, stating they had a good operation going and wouldn't let me ruin it. She signaled to one of her sons, who then pulled out a gun and pointed it at me. The son with the gun echoed his mother's words, telling me to leave and not come back, implying threats if I did. I raised my hand slowly, heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. But as I looked at their smug faces, something inside me snapped. This was my house, my life, and I'd be damned if I let these lowlifes take it from me. I warned them that they had no idea who they were messing with. I turned and ran out of the house, their laughter following me. But I wasn't running away. I was running towards justice. First stop, the police station. I burst in, out of breath, and spilled the whole story to the first officer I saw. At first, they were skeptical. It sounded too crazy to be true. But when I mentioned the meth lab, things got serious fast. I spent the next few hours giving statements, showing property records, and helping the police plan a raid. They wanted to catch my aunt and her sons red-handed. As night fell, I watched from a safe distance as a SWAT team surrounded my house. There was shouting, the sound of breaking glass, and then silence. One by one, I saw them being led out in handcuffs. My aunt was screaming about her rights, while her sons looked shell-shocked. But it wasn't over. The police found enough evidence to charge them with drug manufacturing, weapons possession, and a host of other crimes. My testimony sealed the deal. In the end, my aunt got 15 years, and her sons each got 10. The aftermath was tough. My house was a disaster, contaminated by the drugs they'd been cooking. It took months of professional cleaning and renovation before it was livable again. But I didn't give up. This was my home, and I was determined to reclaim it. During the cleanup, I found something unexpected, a safe hidden in the basement. Inside was cash, jewelry, and documents detailing my aunt's business dealings. It was a goldmine of evidence, not just against her, but against her suppliers and customers too. I turned everything over to the police, and the domino effect was amazing. Over the next year, I watched as a whole network of drug dealers and criminals were taken down. My aunt's empire crumbled, and with it, a significant chunk of the local drug trade. The final surprise came about 6 months after the raid. I got a call from a detective working on the case. The detective informed me that they had been analyzing the financial records from my aunt's operation. They discovered she had been embezzling money from her suppliers for years. The detective explained that they had seized a substantial amount of assets, and as the victim and key witness, I was entitled to a portion as restitution. The amount they quoted left me speechless. It was enough to not only cover all the repairs to my house, but also replace everything I'd lost, and then some. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. My aunt had always been after easy money, willing to step on anyone to get it. In the end, her greed was funding my fresh start. I used some of the money to install a top-of-the-line security system in my newly renovated house. The rest I set aside for my next adventure. But this time I wasn't running away from home. I was building a safer, stronger community right where I was. My aunt and her sons are still in prison, where they'll be for a long time. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about the day I came home, if they regret not just leaving when I told them to. But mostly I'm just grateful. Grateful that I found the strength to stand up to them, grateful for the people who helped me take them down, and grateful for the chance to turn a nightmare into a new beginning. As for me, well, I've got a new appreciation for home. It's not just a place to sleep or store your stuff. It's a sanctuary, a piece of yourself that's worth fighting for. And fight for it I did. My husband and I met in college. We were both studying business, and we hit it off immediately. After graduation, we got married and started our careers. We always talked about having kids, but we wanted to be financially stable first. 3 years ago, we felt ready to start a family. It took some time, but finally I got pregnant with our daughter. We were overjoyed. Throughout my pregnancy, my mother-in-law kept making comments about how we should raise the baby naturally and organically. I brushed it off, thinking she was just excited about becoming a grandmother. When our daughter was born, the comments intensified. My mother-in-law criticized everything from the diapers we used to the baby food we bought. It caused some tension, but my husband always said to just ignore her. We lived far away, so it wasn't a constant issue. This Christmas, we decided to visit my husband's family. It would be our daughter's first time meeting them in person. I was nervous but hoped it would go well. At first, everything seemed fine. My mother-in-law was doting on our daughter and I thought maybe she had gotten over her judgmental attitude. How wrong I was. One day, my husband and I went shopping, leaving our daughter with my mother-in-law. When we returned, our baby was sleeping on a strange blanket. My mother-in-law said it was a gift from a friend. I didn't think much of it at the time. A few days after Christmas, our daughter got sick. She had a fever and was incredibly fussy. Then she developed a rash. I was terrified and started packing to take her to the doctor. That's when my mother-in-law dropped the bomb. My mother-in-law tried to reassure me, saying it was just chickenpox. When I asked how she knew, she casually admitted to intentionally exposing our daughter to the illness. She explained that she had arranged for a friend to wipe the blankets on their grandchild who had chickenpox, believing it was the best way to build immunity. I was shocked and furious. I confronted her about the dangers of exposing such a young baby to chickenpox without our consent. My mother-in-law dismissed my concerns, claiming I was being dramatic and that it was perfectly natural. My husband and father-in-law came in trying to calm the situation. To my shock, my husband started defending his mother. He tried to downplay the situation, saying his mother was just trying to help and that it wasn't a big deal. I vehemently disagreed, emphasizing that she had intentionally made our daughter sick. We took our daughter to the doctor, who confirmed it was chickenpox. He warned us about potential scarring and told us to tape socks on her hands to prevent scratching. I was furious and heartbroken. On the drive back, my husband kept making excuses for his mother. I couldn't believe he was taking her side. When we got home, I started packing our things. We were supposed to stay longer, but I couldn't bear to be in that house anymore. As I was loading the car the next morning, my husband came out and locked it, with our daughter inside. He insisted that we weren't leaving until I apologized to his mother. I was incredulous that he expected me to apologize. He accused me of overreacting, stating that chickenpox isn't fatal and that I was making his mother feel bad. In that moment, I realized my husband was more concerned about his mother's feelings than our daughter's health and safety. I managed to get into the car and drove away, leaving him behind. My family was supportive when I told them what happened. They helped me get home safely and offered a place to stay. My husband stayed with his parents, tending to his mother, who conveniently came down with shingles shortly after. In the weeks that followed, I had time to reflect on our relationship. I realized this wasn't just about the chickenpox incident. It was about my husband's inability to prioritize our family over his mother's whims. I decided to take action. I contacted a lawyer and filed for full custody of our daughter. I also reached out to Child Protective Services to report my mother-in-law's actions. They took the matter seriously, especially given the potential long-term consequences for our daughter. My husband was shocked when he received the custody papers. He tried to convince me I was overreacting, but I stood firm. In the end, the court sided with me, granting me full custody and limiting my husband's visitation rights. My mother-in-law was barred from unsupervised contact with our daughter. It has been a challenging journey, but I know I made the right decision for my daughter's safety and well-being. My wife and I have been together for over 20 years now. We met in nursing school, both of us driven by a desire to help others. After graduation, we got married and settled down in a small town on the West Coast. Life was good, you know. We both had stable jobs at the local hospital, and we were happy. My wife's family lived on the East Coast. Her mom, dad, and 2 younger sisters. We'd visit during holidays, but it wasn't often due to the distance. My wife was always closer to her mom than her sisters were. I guess that's why everything happened the way it did. In March 2020, the world was going crazy with this new virus, and hospitals were overwhelmed. My wife got a call from her youngest sister saying their mom was really sick. Not with the virus, thankfully, but she wasn't doing well. My wife, being the caring person she is, decided to fly across the country to help out. I remember our conversation before she left. I expressed my concern about her traveling during such a dangerous time. She insisted that she had to go because her mother needed her, knowing that her sisters wouldn't be much help. I told her I understood but asked her to be careful. She promised she would and said she'd call me every day. So off she went, 2,000 miles away. At first, things seemed okay. She'd call and tell me about taking care of her mom, working long shifts at a local hospital, and trying to clean up her mom's place. Apparently, her mom had become a bit of a hoarder over the years. During one of our calls, she described how bad the hoarding situation was, saying she could barely move around without knocking things over. I offered to come help, but she declined, insisting that she could handle it, though she admitted it was a lot to deal with. For months, she worked herself to the bone, 4 to 12 shifts a week at the hospital, then spending her free time taking care of her mom and clearing out the house. I was worried about her, but she insisted she was fine. Then one day, she called me in tears. She explained that they had to put her mom in a care facility and that she wasn't expected to live much longer. I offered to come, but she said she needed to be there for her mother's final days. The next day, I got another call. This time, my wife was furious. She told me that the day after they placed her mom in the facility, her youngest sister had thrown her out of the house. She explained how her sister had accused them of stealing and even changed the locks. My wife was in disbelief, especially after everything she had done. I was shocked. How could anyone be so cruel, especially to family? My wife was devastated. She had spent months taking care of her dying mother, cleaning up years of hoarding, and this was how she was repaid. The relationship with her sisters completely fell apart after that. When her mom passed away in 2021, the youngest sister was made the executor of the will. We couldn't even get childhood photos from her mom's condo. It was like they were trying to erase my wife from the family history. Life went on though. We tried to put it behind us, but I could tell it still hurt my wife deeply. She'd sometimes look at old family photos and sigh, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Then, in April 2024, we got some unexpected news. The youngest sister, who was single and about to retire, had died suddenly. It was a shock to say the least, but what came next was even more surprising. We found out that my wife was a beneficiary of a decades-old retirement account. Apparently, it had rolled over from her dad to her mom, then to the youngest sister, and now to us. The amount? $775,000. When we got the news, I couldn't believe it. I asked my wife if I had heard the amount correctly. She was stunned into silence, barely able to confirm the figure. We both wondered how this was possible. I suggested it must have been set up years ago before all the family drama happened. My wife admitted she didn't know how to feel about this unexpected turn of events. It was a bittersweet moment. On one hand, it was a life-changing amount of money. On the other, it brought back all the pain and betrayal we'd experienced. In the end, we decided to use part of the money to set up a scholarship fund for nursing students. It felt right somehow, a way to honor my wife's mom and create something positive out of all the negativity.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.